All right, the baseball's hitting the water. That means it's another episode of Splash Hit. We're excited to join you today. I'm FP Santangelo, broadcaster for the San Francisco Giants, joined by Susan Slusser, beat writer, reporter for the Chronicle for the Giants. She's nice enough to join us today. But first, we got to take care of some business. Subscribers on YouTube, subscribe to us on YouTube, excuse me, rate 5 stars wherever you get your podcast. We're pushing to get our first 1,000 subs. Share the show with a friend. Have them subscribe too. This podcast is getting a lot of momentum. We've gotten a lot of great feedback so far, but we're going to make it easy for you. Give us a follow. We're on Instagram. We got a new Instagram right now at Splash Hit Territory. We're on Twitter at Splash Hit Territory. You can follow Susan Slusser on Twitter. You can follow myself on Twitter at Fight and Hydrant. So we got to take care of some business first, Susan, but things are going well so far.
Yeah, we're having a lot of fun with this. We've got some guests. We're trying to get some guests coming up, and I'll be coming and going as my schedule allows. I'm a not you're the permanent guy, but I'm gonna join as I can. So what we got today, FP?
Well, we're going to talk about Joe Maddon. He had some strong comments on KMBR. Then we're going to talk about the GM meetings. Obviously, there's a lot going on in Las Vegas right now. There's a new hitting coach and some free agent possibilities, and maybe some guys that the Giants already have in-house for options. So let's start with Joe Maddon and what he said on KMBR. He said it was insulting that the Giants hired Tony Vitello as their manager. And I was just listening to it the other day, and insulting is a strong word. So your thoughts on what he said and what Joe Maddon said on KBR?
Y- You know, I this is a weird one for me because look, I know Joe Maddon's out there. I'm sure he's been trying to like get back in to the managing game for a while, and it probably is frustrating for him to see somebody who does not have pro experience of any kind get a job like this. But he's usually known as a classy fella, and I think he maybe misspoke. He's kind of a fun-loving guy. He might have even kind of meant it, I don't know, slightly jokingly. I don't know. What I do know is that in the SF Standard, my former Chronicle colleague and good friend John Shea talked to Tony Vitello at the GM meetings yesterday, and Tony responded to this as graciously as you could possibly imagine. He said, he's got nothing but like huge respect for Joe Maddon. He knows Joe Maddon's one of those guys where the reputation is he's got a big personality. He likes to let a team show its character. That's one of the reasons he's won. He's so well regarded by players for that. And Tony Vitello said, he thinks he's that kind of guy. He'd like to be that kind of guy. He hopes Joe Maddon's not so mad at him getting hired for this job that he doesn't want to talk to him, because he's a guy who was on his list to talk to. He really wants to kind of go straight to the source and find out some of like, how did you do this? So I suspect they will probably talk very soon, and I bet that's a hilarious conversation. When it does, I hope we hear about it, because I think Tony, knowing Joe Maddon and from what we're learning about Tony Vitello, I think those two are kind of natural friends. But Tony really handled this beautifully, and that's the first kind of high profile guy who has said on the record, like, what are they doing here? So interesting.
Yeah, it gave me I didn't get an interview vibe for the
Yeah.
Giants, and it kind of had old man get off my lawn vibes. And I think you're right in the sense, Susan, that he realized what a strong statement that was, because he's not stupid, but he realized how strong a statement that was. And the whole rest of the interview, if you listen to the whole thing, he tried to backpedal the rest of the way. And what else is Tony going to say publicly? I'm sure amongst his friends, he's like, wow, right out of the gate. And I'm sure there's some sentiment through Major League Baseball, just like Joe Maddon said, where, hey, that is insulting. There is guys that rode the bus for 27 years. There are guys that paid their dues. But I think also what Joe Maddon said was, it's more about relatability with the players. It's more about getting through to the players. And I've talked to a lot of coaches in Major League Baseball, and they've said it's not so much the message, it's how you connect with players. It's all about connectivity with the players. So I asked Tony La Russa one day, Susan, this was in the press box in Washington, D.C., and I said, Tony, I always wanted to be a big league manager. That was one of my dreams. And I said, I'm still tinkering with the idea. The broadcasting thing's going really well right now. What would be some advice you would give to a young big league manager? And Tony just pulled me aside. One of the nicest guys I've ever come across, and I consider him a good friend. He said, FP, the biggest mistake young managers make is they want to show people how much they know versus getting your players to play for you. He said the number one thing for a young manager is getting your players to play for you, not to show how smart you are, like with bunt defenses and strategy and pitching moves and bullpen usage. It's getting your guys to play for you. And I think that's the number one thing Tony Vitello has going for him right now. And there's going to be naysayers. There's going to be a lot of old school baseball guys. It's the only sport I think where we're really stuck in our ways.
Yeah.
Like there's
Well,
all kinds of new stuff coming out in other sports, but baseball's so stuck in their ways that when you do go out of the box and hire somebody that's a college coach, it's going to ruffle some feathers.
LaRusso would be a good resource. He was kind of non-traditional too. He'd gone to law school, hadn't been a big league player. He didn't check every single box. He had paid his dues as a minor league guy, but he wasn't the traditional guy for sure. And look at his career. He's a Hall of Famer. There are plenty of guys who pay their dues and come up and don't do anything. I mean, it's not a guarantee that you're going to be a great big league manager. We've talked about this already. The fact that Buster Posey has taken this big swing, he's behind him, the weight of Buster Posey, and then you've got, of course, Dusty Baker, now Bruce Bochy is guys to bounce things off of right there with you. You've got your buddy Jay Stingler right next to you as whatever title it's going to be, probably bench coach or assistant manager, something like that. He's got so many positives around this. I don't think he's worried at all about Joe Maddon. Joe Maddon's not really a factor right now in the big leagues anyway. And I can tell you what, the Giants players are going to look at something like that and go like, oh, no, don't come after our guy. That's a way to get guys to come together a little bit too. It's like, hey, maybe we could say that internally, but nobody outside better be saying something like that about our guy. And I think that's going to be a little bit of a plus too. It's really interesting situation. There are going to be times, and Tony Vitello said this repeatedly. Look, I know I don't have pro experience. It's something I'm going to have to deal with. He very much seems like a guy who knows what he doesn't know. And they always say that's so important for leaders, particularly coming into a new job. You just can't assume you know everything. And he knows he doesn't. He's been very upfront with that, pretty self-deprecating too. But I really just like the sort of generosity of spirit he showed in responding to this. I think that was that, and that will be noticed too, particularly by the other big league managers.
Well, publicly, he's got to say that. I'd love to hear what he said privately about it. But if I know Tony Vitello, like I think I do already, and spending some time with him, he's been a salmon swimming upstream his whole career. So, I mean, I think he takes this and it motivates him. So when you're always the underdog, and even the Italian underdog, and I could speak to this, stuff like this, it's fuel in your tank. So this will motivate him, especially if he starts to think, well, if that's the sentiment, and I think, and we'll change subjects here in a minute. I think that the Giants, and I talked to Tony about this afterwards. I said, you got to be the most hated team in baseball this year. You got to piss everybody off. This isn't making friends and going out there and hugging people before the game. And like, if the Giants and Tony Vitello are doing it the right way, they got to piss people off this year. They got to be the most hated team in baseball. And that means they're doing their jobs. They're doing things the right way.
It's funny you mentioned that because I know Buster has said a few times, like, you know what, I don't like this players hugging guys from the other team before the game. Like, that's not what we're here for. This is a competition. Buster, the ultimate competitor. Of course, he doesn't love stuff like that. And baseball has gotten to be a little clubby. Like, you see guys just hanging out before the game all the time. You'll see guys from the other team sometimes come over and hang out behind the cage. I don't remember that used to happen. That's all a little unusual. So I don't mind going in with a little bit of an edge. Hang with your buddy after the game. That's fine. But pregame, we're in it to win it. Go away. I'm not talking to you now. I'm not even gonna say hi at first base or whatever.
We used to yell when guys hug, no love making on the field. And if you like them that much, take them to dinner.
Is that the word you used?
Yeah, no, we did. We said no love making on the field, and if you like them that much, take them to dinner. So I'd love for it to be the fighting Giants this year and pissing people off and bat flipping and all the stuff they did at Tennessee within reason. But like when you talk about the chip they have to have on their shoulder. Maybe it starts with the manager and your direct reflection of your manager. I always thought this could be interesting, and I think it
Yeah.
could be a fun season. And
Yeah.
Tony definitely is going to use this as fuel in the tank. And like we talked about, the last show, his first speech in spring training, you'd think it'd be something about attention to detail and how the Blue Jays missed the World Series by this much on the play at the plate. And if we just increase this much in our defense, in our base running, in our energy level every day, in our two-strike approach, and whatever they implement, I think they're going to win a lot more games than they lose this year.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the Blue Jays because our next topic is Blue Jays related. The Giants have at least one new hitting coach that we now know. It sounds an awful lot like a Giants player of note. It's not Hunter Pence, it's Hunter Mintz. What do we know about him? What do you think we can expect from a guy coming from the Blue Jays? And he's not a household name either. This was an assistant hitting coach. So, what do you think he brings, and what do you know?
I don't know a lot about him. I do know a lot about the Blue Jays. One of my best friends is a broadcaster for the Blue Jays, Joe Siddle. So I tuned into a lot of games this year just to hear his voice. And then all of a sudden, you start to fall in love with a scrappy bunch of players that didn't strike out a lot. And I think when you talk about some things the Giants need to improve on, I think they were 19th in Major League Baseball in strikeouts this year with a little over 8 a game. And when you look at what the Blue Jays did, they were second in baseball. They struck out 6.78 times a game. They put the ball in play, but they didn't sacrifice power and they didn't sacrifice average. And what does that mean? It's just a mindset. We used to say 2 for yourself and 1 for the ball club, meaning let it rip for 2. Your first 2 strikes, come out of your shoes. But then when you get to 2 strikes, make an adjustment, spread out, choke up, a lot like Dom Smith did last year, a lot like Wilmer Flores has done in the past, where you put the ball in play, good things happen. What's your batting average when you strike out? It's 0-0-0. It's always going to be 0-0-0. And I guess the new philosophy with analytics is, what's a ground ball to short do with 2 strikes? You can still do some damage. And I think there's some certain guys in the Giants lineup that, yeah, like Rafi Devers, swing out of your ass with like 2 strikes. I don't care. But Matt Chapman could be a 270 hitter. Uh, uh, Willie Adames could be a 270, 280 hitter with a 2-strike approach. And now you're putting pressure on the defense. You're putting pressure on the pitcher. I got the Padres numbers right here. Or I'm sorry, the Blue Jays numbers right here. The Padres were third. That's why I said that. I'm reading it. The Padres struck out 1,161 times. That was third in all of baseball. The Blue Jays were second with 1,099. The Royals were first with 1,096. So the Blue Jays were just 3 strikeouts more than the Royals last year. And I think moving forward with the Giants, Susan, they got to be better with 2 strikes and they got to put the ball in play.
You know what? I had a long conversation with Matt Chapman right at the end of the year and wrote a story after the season ended about Matt Chapman's approach with 2 strikes because it was terrible. And he would tell you that. And he talked to me about it on the record. He was really disappointed in it. There were some reasons. And absolutely, this was the last thing he mentioned. But that the hand injuries he had, which by the end of the season, it was both hands. The one had the ligament strains that were so severe. For a while they thought they were torn, and then the other he had that huge, absolute like wound on the heel of his hand, and he really couldn't choke up any. He has choked up some in the past with 2 strikes. He just couldn't. He could not hold the bat any further up, or it was right. He was feeling it right there, and he wouldn't have swung with the bat with any authority doing that. But he said early in this season, the 2-strike approach, it wasn't just him. It was a lot of guys because nobody was hitting and everybody was trying so hard to. You start going a little bit out of the zone. I mean, this is typical of any team in a slump, but particularly with 2 strikes, you're really trying to like protect, and it just it kind of snowballs, but particularly for Chapman and then the physical stuff. But he said that's what he is spending the offseason working on is the 2-strike approach, hitting with 2 strikes, choking up. I think that especially with Matt Chapman doing that, we're going to see an emphasis in spring training from everybody because he is really one of the leaders of the position players by far and very forceful. When he's doing something, I think everybody's going to get really right on board and serious with it. So that's going to be an interesting development. But if Matt Chapman can start even having like league average two-strike hitting approach, that's massive where he hits in the lineup.
Yeah, and it's just a mentality too. It's just wanting to put the ball in play with two strikes. I think guys that strike out a lot, Susan, are afraid to strike out. And what happens when you're afraid to strike out, you're afraid to get to two strikes. So what do you do early in the count? You swing. You want to put the ball in play. You don't want to get to two strikes because now you start overthinking it. I'm going to strike out again. And then you go out of the zone again to get to two strikes. Where the mindset is not so much the two strike approach. It's like, I'm not afraid to hit with two strikes. I'm comfortable in a 1-2 count, a 2-2 count. Now I fight. Now I stick my nose in the dirt and I'm going to battle you. And I think if you have that mindset 1 through 9, and everybody or most guys are buying into that, now you're making it really tough on a starting pitcher and you're getting into bullpens. And I know maybe getting into bullpens isn't what it used to be because everybody throws a million now. But at least you're making the pitcher work to get through your lineup 2 times.
Yeah. I mean, put the ball in play. One of the Giants' better hitters with runners in scoring position with two strikes was Patrick Bailey. And this was a guy who really struggled at the plate most of the year until toward the end. I like the fact that he finished strong, by the way. I thought that was, but I don't think anybody was going to talk up much of what he did in the first half, but he was reliably coming through with runners in scoring position because he was willing to put the ball in play. He was moving guys over. He was hitting sacrifice flies. I love that. But you mentioned Dom Smith and Wilmer Flores. Both of them will choke up. Both of them really focus on putting the ball just in play with two strikes. Really good approaches. It's possible neither comes back. Obviously, that position right now is sort of first DH. A lot of bodies. Devers has got first dibs. Eldridge is probably big in the mix now. Very much looks like probably on the opening day roster. If you talked about trading him last week a little bit. I don't know
I
if
was
that's something that
joking.
happens.
That sounded bad. I love Bryce Eldridge. I want to
I
be a
don't think
Giant forever.
it's certainly there's a lot of interest in him. I don't think that's a joke at all. I think if they want a big piece, that's probably the guy they're going to have to move. Who knows whether they do or not? They certainly value him, but I really liked what Dom Smith brought a lot. I would love to see him come back. And I think everyone knows I'm big Wilmer Flores stan. I'm just, I love the guy. I know he's on the downside of his career, but look what he did earlier this season last year. And then Devers shows up, his playing time dips. Of course, his numbers dip, but that guy's a professional hitter. He's never going to be a fast guy. He's not going to steal you a base. He's not good in the field. But as a bench guy, come on. I still think he's got value. There's no way they keep both, but I know I'm kind of throwing this out of the blue, but do you have strong thoughts on either guy? If you could keep one, which do you keep?
I'll keep Dom Smith all day. Dom Smith is a winning player. He's a
Yeah.
championship player. He's Gold Glove first baseman. He gets you a clutch hit. He's a winning player. The Giants need more winning players. I would sign Dom Smith. He can play the outfield. It's not just a first baseman. He can play left field, whatever. He can DH. He's a defensive replacement for Devers every single day. So there's your safety net with a 2 or 3 run lead in the 7th inning. And more importantly than all this, or just as important, I should say, he's a good teammate.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that isn't as big as commodities it used to be back in the old days, where this is a guy that's joyful to be around. He's in a good mood every single day. He's always pumping guys up. He's a little bit quiet, but he's always got a smile on his face. And he's ready to play at a moment's notice. He got a bunch of big hits. He was the guy for when he played, they won.
Yeah.
And then when he got hurt on that stretch against the Dodgers on the double play and he messed up his hamstring, they kind of went south after Dom Smith got hurt at the end of the season. So when you have winning players like that, and I didn't know anything about Dom Smith. And I mean, I watched him play in New York. I was just like, oh, this is a big prospect. The more I saw him play, he's as good as I've seen at first base. And then just the 2-strike approach and the clutch hits and putting the ball in play. I'm a huge Dom Smith fan. I'm sure Buster and Zach are too. That's a guy that I would make a priority to sign back for 2026.
Well, with what he did last year, there's going to be a lot of teams after him. He's a good all-around player. And I mean, he is a sweet fielding first baseman. I had no idea. I said that to him one day. I just don't remember seeing you play first base that much. And he was like, yeah, I was playing behind Pete Alonso. Yep, that'll do it. But I asked him how he learned to play first base so well. And he had steps behind his house in in LA growing up, and he'd just go get the craziest angles he could, just try to get the ball to bounce off in wild angles by trying to hit different areas on the steps. And I was like, that's just so smart. He had all
That's
sorts of
good stuff.
smart ways. Yeah. He just wanted to be a great fielder, and he really is good. He just hadn't gotten a lot of opportunity to do it at the big league level. What were all these teams doing missing on this guy so long?
I don't know. I love when he like goes to his right towards second, and then he just takes the ball and he throws like a grenade up in the air, and it's all slow and it's like right on the money as the pitcher's crossing the bag, and then all the diving plays, his feet. He's got a good arm. I could do a whole show on Dom Smith. I hope they sign him back.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Well, free agency, we touched on free agency a little bit last week because the GM's meetings are, are going on. We talked mostly kind of about some really super big names, and then possible that maybe Bryce Harper gets made available at some point. What else you got? Because it's clear to me that right field, maybe catcher or backup catcher, some areas where they're going to be looking free agency, and definitely in the bullpen. We talked a little bit about starting pitching, but bullpen, right field, what you got?
I'm a big Harrison Bader fan. I like what he did in Philadelphia when they traded for him. I think he hit, I got it right here. He hit over 300 with 5 home runs, kind of sparked the Phillies. And when he got hurt, they kind of lost their energy level, almost like what Drew Gilbert did for the Giants when he first got called up. He's a plus center fielder. The Giants need to work on their outfield defense. He's an energy guy. He seems like he'd be Tony Vitello's favorite player. He can ruffle some feathers too. He can piss some people off. So maybe that's what Tony wants too. But he's only had 2 full seasons with an OPS above league average, 2018 and 21. There's a risk that he kind of comes back to the norm next year, but I don't know. I just see 271, 17 home runs, 54 RBIs. He had 124 hits. And I just remember watching a lot of Phillies games down the stretch, and he was what made them go on a team with so many superstars with Kyle Schwarber and Bryce Harper and Nick Castellanos and Trey Turner. He was the guy in their lineup that was getting all the big hits. He was pumping them up. He had an energy of that ball club. I wasn't a big Harrison Bader fan as a Yankee or even a Met, but the more I watch him with the Philadelphia Phillies this year, I'm like, that guy'd be a great Giant.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some good names out there. I've mentioned Kyle Tucker. I know he goes with a qualifying offer, but and they've given out a few, over the years, and they've also been making noises about not tying up too much money in a lot of long-term big deals. They have quite a few already, so that might be a pipe dream, him or Cody Bellinger. But I like the idea of one more big bat, and especially somebody that can go get the ball like a Bellinger. So who knows? And you know what? He's done a lot of 1 or 2 year deals. So maybe he is a guy that they potentially could consider.
I was watching MLB Network this morning. JP Morosi said that the Guardians are listening to offers for Stephen Kwan.
That'd be Bay Area guy.
I mean, let's go. I mean, Gold Glove. Is there anybody better in left field than Stephen Kwan with his defense? And you're talking about upgrading on defense. Jung-Hoo Lee's great. But if you put a Kwan in left and a Bader in center and maybe Jung-Hoo Lee in right with his arm, I think he has a right field arm and might pan out as that. I mean,
so are you moving Elliot Ramos in this scenario?
I don't know. I'm not a GM, Susan. Don't put me on the spot. 156.
You're going with a 4-man outfield. I see.
I am. We're gonna have a rover. Tony Vitello is gonna institute a rover.
Honestly, there were times.
But Kwan posted 156 games last year. He hit 272. He's got a little pop in his bat. He had 170 hits, and he's just a baseball player. He's a baseball player.
Yeah, I'm all in favor of that. I'd also go out and try to get Joe Ryan, another local guy. Absolutely, do that.
Joe Ryan might want to be a Giant. I've heard rumors, so that would be cool.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm sure he would.
He's friends with Logan Webb. They're really good. Yeah. They're real tight.
You know what Logan is friends with, I think, at this point, almost everyone high-profile player in the major leagues, because we throw out almost any name like, I'm friends with Logan. So that's what happens when you're like one of the friendliest guys in the bigs.
Did we talk about him being fourth for the Cy Young? That's pretty cool.
Oh yeah, we should.
I mean, since we're segueing into Logan, he was so great on the show the other day. We can't thank him and the Giants enough for coming on the show. But Logan Webb, fourth in the Cy Young. He led the league in strikeouts. He led the league in innings pitched. I don't think people care about wins and losses anymore, but is he ever going to win one with these guys in front of him right now? And does he
Yeah.
even care? I think he would trade that for a World Series championship any day of the week.
Oh, he would want that. He'd take the title over a little bit of hardware, yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's tough in a division with Skeens, now Yamamoto, my goodness. But I would take a guy who's in the top 5 every year, like Logan Webb, and is right up either leading or second in innings pitched. We're in the era of how many starting pitchers can you keep healthy all year? The answer is often just a handful, 2 or 3 if you're lucky. And Logan Webb is just a horse, and he's great. So, I yeah, top 5, that's fine. Just, he would say, "Win a title." I think he did. Didn't he say something like that? I don't know what we're asking him about. We're like X or Y or a championship, and of course he said a championship because that's what we're here for, right?
I think he means it too. It's not BS. Like he absolutely means it. He's so old school. You know what look nice next to him is Freddie Peralta. I'm just saying. And
Ooh,
maybe Willie Adama says, "Hey, Freddie, it's really good here in San Francisco.
that's
Get your
his
butt over
bestie.
here. We're about to win." I know,
That's his
right?
best buddy, yeah. He's, yeah, they were next door neighbors in Milwaukee. They are tight, so that's a good call.
Giants need another FP, I feel like. So Freddie Peralta should come to the Giants. 17-6 last year with a 2.70 ERA. And he's a gamer, man. And he's a legit ace. And you throw him in the mix, and maybe these free agents we're talking about, and a new manager, and playing with energy, attention to detail, and working on the little things that win games, and playing the game with a passion for 2.5, 3 hours every single night. Now you're talking October baseball, but as we know, you got to stay healthy, and it's a long season.
For me, I mean, they definitely need some more starters. Greg Johnson was pretty clear when I talked to him that they don't want to do a lot of long-term deals for starting pitchers. So I don't know necessarily. I'd love to see it. So maybe the friendliness with Adamas, familiarity with Zach Manassian, maybe those kind of things help. You're right. He'd look fantastic.
Well, the
Um,
Brewers dealt Corbin Burns a year before he was up for free agency. Devin Williams, the same thing, and Josh
yeah.
Hader. So that's kind of their MO. Like they're a small market team. They don't have a lot of money. And right before you're a free agent, they want to get value for you. So they've done this before. And I think Freddie Peralta would look great in the orange and black.
Well, we've talked a lot about the outfield, but they've got some internal options. They've talked about some of the internal options in the rotation. Um, is Marco Luciano ever going to be a factor? Is Grant McCray? He was up and down a little bit last year. Obviously, one of the better fielding options that they have. We talked last week about the fact that a lot of their young outfielders coming up not necessarily the best defenders. He's a good one. Matos is a guy that some teams are targeting in trades potentially. So, do they have an internal option that potentially could be in right, or do they have to go free agent for right field?
That's a great question, Susan. Thanks for teeing me up. I think they got to go free agent, and I love McCray. Grant McCray's one of my favorite guys to be around on a daily basis. That throw he made from right field this year in such a big game was incredible. I think it was 100 and something miles an hour, and he can cover ground out there. He can run the bases. The Giants need speed. I think he has value at the major league level. The one thing I will say about anybody in general in baseball, when you get your day in the sun, you got to shine because you don't know when those opportunities are going to come. And when I think of the young players that I covered back east, whether it was Bryce Harper, whether it was Juan Soto, um, they got their chance and it happened. It either happens or it doesn't happen. And
Well,
with
those are
Lucy,
kind of extreme examples, FP. I
yeah,
mean,
that's true. But like Luciano's had some chances, Matos has had some chances.
yeah.
And are they the type of player? And I think just in general with Zach and Buster and Tony, who you get in free agency has to be the style of play that you want to have for 162. Because you get in trouble if I want this guy just because he's good. I want this guy just because he's good. I want this guy just because he's good. And then you got a hodgepodge and you got too many different types of players. Like, what's our philosophy? Are we going to be scrappy? Are we going to run the bases? Are we going to have speed? Are we going to play defense? Or are we just going to swing out of our ass and hit home runs and throw it as hard as we can. Like, what's our philosophy? And then you sit down at that big long table and you said, this is the kind of team I want. Then it helps you like focus in and narrow in on what kind of players you want. So with these guys, Luciano just he seems like a low energy guy to me. I really I don't know him very well. I've only seen him in snippets. Matos has had some opportunities where I'm like, this guy's the best, and then all of a sudden it goes the other way, and he hasn't really wrapped his head around not playing every day, and that's a big adjustment for a young player. You play every day in A ball, you play every day in Double A, play every day in Triple A. You get into a rhythm, you slow the game down. All of a sudden, you get to the highest level with the best players, and you're playing once a week or twice a week if you're lucky. And that was hard for me late in my career to deal with that. I couldn't imagine being a 23, 24-year-old and all of a sudden, like, nobody ever taught me how to be a bench guy in the minors and how to stay ready and how to keep my eyes locked in on 100 miles an hour when I'm not playing. And that's why veteran guys are so much better as bench guys. And it retards the progress of minor leaguers when you bring them up and then just sit on the bench.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And I think we do have an idea what the team's looking for, particularly when it comes to the lineup. They're looking for guys kind of like what we're talking about. Don't strike out a lot, put the ball in play. I think that they feel like, especially with this ballpark, and it makes sense. Power is not the thing that they are necessarily emphasizing right now. I think they want contact hitters, and that's what they're drafting. They're drafting guys who don't necessarily profile as big home run hitters. They took a lot of guys with high averages, decent walks, good on base percentage. I think in that ballpark, that's probably a good way to go. So I think we're going to see an awful lot more of that.
Let's go. Oh, baseball's back, baby. They're going to play some hardcore hardball this year. All right. I know you had a long day. You're in London right now. I'm going to be visiting you in London. I'm going to be your roommate for a week or so here coming up after Thanksgiving. I'm super excited for that.
Pubcast.
That's how close Susan and I are. I'm traveling to London and staying with her in a couple of weeks, and she's going to show me around. We're super excited about that. Subscribe to Splash Hit Territory on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. We are part of the Foul Territory Network. We will see you guys next week. Susan, thanks so much for joining me. It's so much easier when you're here. I know you're only going to be here on certain shows here and there, but the more the merrier, man. Thanks for coming on today.
Awesome. Thanks, FP. We will, or at least FP, we'll see you guys next week.
Swing hard in case you hit it on Splash Hit.